feeling low.
Hello there, my lemon slices, and welcome back to the Lemonade Stand, or welcome if you are new. My name is Brianna. I'm a certified personal trainer, a big, huge biology nerd, and a registered dietitian to be. Today we have episode 5 of my series, True Science. This is a series in which I combine my love of science with my interest in true crime. In this series, we talk about everything from doctors that turned out to be frauds, crazy medical phenomenon, mad scientists, and everything in between. Before we proceed, if you love science-based health, wellness, and fitness education, with some lulls, and some dry sarcasm on the way, hit that subscribe button and join the Lemonade Stand. I would really love to have you here. Without further babbling, let's make lemonade, I say as I drink coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So unlike past episodes of this series, we're not going to talk about like one case or one specific person. Today I want to talk about a really interesting medical phenomenon having to do with psychology. Most of us know this phenomenon as Munchausen by proxy. However, the name has been updated and it's now referred to as fictitious disorder imposed on another, which I'm sure there is a very good reason for that name change, which is easily justifiable and explainable by mental health and medical experts, but it's a pain in the rear to say. Saying Munchausen by proxy is much easier. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, as well as a couple of cases of it that have made it to the world of true crime, because fictitious disorder imposed on another has resulted in criminal convictions before. So Munchausen by proxy, aka fictitious disorder imposed on another, which I will be calling FDIA, is considered a type of mental illness. It's characterized as someone, usually a parent or other type of caregiver, acting as though their child or dependent has a medical condition or several conditions that need medical attention. The catch is that the dependent or the child is not actually sick, which means that the parent or the caregiver is lying. So FDIA is actually just one type of fictitious disorder. Another type involves someone making up false medical conditions for themselves. The impose on another part of the phrase is what indicates that it is being imposed on another individual. So all fictitious disorders are considered mental illnesses, as they're pretty much always linked to some kind of emotional or psychological distress. However, as in FDIA, when the fictitious disorder is imposed on another person, that person then becomes a victim too. And when a child is involved, as per the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, it's considered child abuse. So the issue with FDIA, as well as all fictitious disorders, is that they can lead to a lot of unnecessary medical tests and procedures to figure out what's wrong with the person, which wastes time, resources, and money. And I think that is the thing that actually baffles me the most about this, about FDIA. We'll talk about this more in detail in a minute, but an infamous story of FDIA that most of us have probably heard of is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Her mom faked all kinds of illnesses in her, like cancer, muscular dystrophy, and seizures. Gypsy was even wheelchair bound for pretty much her whole life, but there was absolutely nothing wrong with her at all. Yet, Gypsy was on all types of medications, like serious prescription medication. She was in a wheelchair. She even had a feeding tube. The thing that's just so unbelievable to me is that Gypsy's mom was able to convince, like, all the doctors they saw that she was sick. You're a medical doctor. You run tests on an individual, on a child, and the tests show that the person is healthy. But you still sign off that they need a feeding tube, you sign off that they need a wheelchair, and you prescribe them a whole bunch of prescription medications that they don't need? Like, what? What? That has to be some type of medical malpractice, like, I would think. Anyway, we'll talk more about that case in a second. So, why FDIA happens is an interesting discussion. Again, it's considered a mental illness, and like a lot of mental illness, there's usually a trigger for it way deep down in the recesses of one's psyche. There can be a lot of reasons for it, but most often it's believed that people who impose disorders on another individual have the desire for just attention and sympathy from other people. Money can also be a big motivator for it as well, because, and let's just be realistic here, a single mom of a child that has cancer gets a lot of sympathy from people. A lot of people see that, and a lot of people, it makes a lot of people feel, it makes people want to help. They want to donate to a GoFundMe or give them a whole bunch of free stuff. In the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, Habitat for Humanity built them a freaking house that was wheelchair accessible because Gypsy was in a wheelchair. They were also given free trips from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, all kinds of other free stuff. And that's because people thought Gypsy was this poor dying child. So most cases of FDIA that we hear about involve children having the fictitious disorder imposed on them by a parent. which is usually a mother. I've actually never heard of a case of FDIA that involved a father. I'm sure it's happened before, but it's extremely rare. And it's well documented that FDIA usually, when it's a parent-child thing, it's almost always a mother doing it and not a father. So anyway, since I just mentioned it a couple times, let's talk about the case of Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy Rose Blanchard. So Claudine Blanchard, aka Dee Dee, was born in Louisiana in 1967 as Claudine Pitre. I'm not going to get too deep into the background of every single of all these people, but just to offer some background, Dee Dee's family would come out and later say that she kind of sucked. They said that she stole from them, and they even suspected Dee Dee of being responsible for her own mother's death. At some point, Dee Dee was actually a nurse's aide and she looked after her mom. When her mom died, the family actually suspected that Dee Dee had something to do with it. So Dee Dee didn't really have the best reputation for being a good caregiver or good person in general. Dee Dee got pregnant with Gypsy when she was 23 years old, and she got pregnant by a 17-year-old child named Rod Blanchard. At the time, they weren't married, probably because he was a minor, which is a big no-no. You do not get pregnant out of wedlock. So they got married, but actually shortly before Gypsy was born, they actually got divorced and ended their marriage at Rod's request. So anyway, it was pretty much immediately after Gypsy was born that Dee Dee started faking illnesses in Gypsy. She was constantly bringing her to the hospital or the doctor for just anything. It all started with Dee Dee saying that Gypsy had sleep apnea when she was a baby, but eventually Dee Dee had the world believing that Gypsy had leukemia, asthma, muscular dystrophy, seizures, brain damage, and learning disabilities. Gypsy, like I said, was even wheelchair bound and had a feeding tube, and she was on a ton of medications, like a lot of medications. I think there's a photo of like after Dee Dee was killed, the police go over to the house and they find like this whole, just like a whole big cabinet, not just like a medicine cabinet, but just like a big, like a kitchen cabinet filled with prescription medications that were for Gypsy that she took. Gypsy had even undergone multiple surgeries for, whatever condition. Remember, we will come to find out that there is absolutely nothing medically wrong with Gypsy. So she was having all of these surgeries and on all this medication for conditions that did not exist. So there are a lot of things about this case that are just unbelievable to me. But like I said before, the thing that I just can't wrap my head around is that Gypsy's mom was able to just like convince the doctors that she was so sick. I assume the doctors ran tests and lab work and everything. Like they didn't just take the mom's word for it. So if you run tests and lab work and stuff and the lab work says that the person's fine, why are you still believing that the patient is sick? I have listened to Bailey Sarian tell this story before. She said that one doctor, and I did come across this when I was researching for my video here, but in Bailey's video, she said that one doctor made an observation that there was nothing wrong with Gypsy. I guess the doctor did like an x-ray or something of her legs and noticed that like the muscles in her legs looked fine, they looked developed and they looked healthy, and like the doctor was like, there's no reason why this child can't walk. And so the doctor confronted Dee Dee, Gypsy's mom, was like, why can't she walk? Like she has muscles in her legs and they're developed, like there's no reason that she can't walk, so why can't she walk? Gypsy's mom didn't like this, so she just didn't go back to that doctor, I guess. But that doctor did make a note of it, and that doctor even noted that they suspected Munchausen by proxy, but it was just never followed up on, I guess. They just Gypsy's mom ended up taking her to, just a new hospital or a new doctor somewhere, and it was just never followed up on. Out of all the doctors they spent years seeing, one that we know of actually stopped and took a step back to question the situation. But I guess all the other doctors were just like, her EEG looks fine, her brain looks fine, but yeah, here's all these anti-seizure drugs. What? Prescription medications can come with, especially ones for like cancer and seizures, they can come with some pretty hefty side effects. And they were prescribing them to a healthy child that didn't need them. I have read in a couple places online that it's theorized that the reason that Dee Dee was able to like kind of sweet talk and convince all the healthcare professionals that Gypsy was sick was because Dee Dee herself had a healthcare background. Remember I said she was a nurse's aide? That could explain how she would have knowledge of medical terminology, but like labs and blood work and stuff, that stuff doesn't lie though. So you're a doctor and you perform an examination and like lab work and stuff and it all comes back normal, but you're like, yeah, let's do surgery on this child. It's inconceivable to me that all of these doctors looked at this healthy child and prescribed her all this medication, performed surgery on her, gave her a feeding tube, all that stuff, and she didn't need it. Like, It's just unbelievable. You guys need to let me know what you think about that. So anyway, eventually, as Gypsy got older, she started a relationship online with some guy named Nick. Super long story short, Gypsy and Nick eventually conspired to unalive Dee Dee, Gypsy's mother. And it was because Gypsy just couldn't take her mom's abuse anymore. Dee Dee had convinced not only the world that Gypsy was sick, she had also convinced Gypsy that she was sick. When she was younger, Gypsy really believed that she was as ill as her mom told her she was. And I mean, she's a child, you can't blame her for that. But it was as Gypsy got older, she caught on to what was really going on and to what her mom was doing. And she started to realize that she was not sick. I think Gypsy said in a later interview from prison, I think she said that there would be times where as she got older, like at home, she'd get out of her wheelchair and like try and walk around because she could walk, and her mom would beat her for it. As she got older, she realized what her mom was doing, and she felt trapped because no one was helping her. All of the many doctors that saw this healthy child were not helping her. I guess they just kept giving her medications and surgery that she didn't need. This is unfortunate, but Gypsy just got to a point where she felt like the only way to get out was to get rid of her mom, aka unalive her, make her go away, make her not be here anymore, which is very sad. And I know a lot of us who heard this story, a lot of people were like, obviously murder is wrong, but like, I get it, you know, it was a very sad situation. It was a difficult situation. So eventually after Dee Dee's unaliving, Gypsy and Nick were arrested, and they were both convicted of her mom's death. Now, what's worth noting is Gypsy just conspired. I don't know exactly what her charges were, but Gypsy just conspired to kill her mom. She didn't actually do the killing. It was actually Nick that did it. He stabbed her mom to death. Nick actually got life in prison, and Gypsy got 10 years. So after Gypsy went to prison, they ran all kinds of tests on her and found absolutely nothing wrong with her except the fact that she had a lazy eye. She did not have a seizure disorder. She could walk. She did not have muscular dystrophy. She was completely fine. Gypsy did an interview with, I can't remember what news cycle it was, but she did an interview with somebody from prison, and I heard snippets of the interview, and I remember her saying in the interview that she actually felt happier and like more free in prison than she ever did in her entire life. And I was just like, damn, that's sad. Stormy just came in here and looked at me like she had something to say, and then she just turned around and walked out. So another case of FDIA, which is not as well known, is the case of Hope Ibarra. Hope Ibarra is a woman who served 10 years in prison for abusing and nearly killing her second child due to FDIA. So a little bit of background on Hope. She apparently has a history of lying. For example, she claimed that she had a PhD and convinced her husband that she was able to get it in 1 year. I think I read that her husband probably thought that this was weird, but he was so supportive, he just didn't even question it at all. He was like, that's my wife. She's so smart. She got a PhD in 1 year. Oh, and with her fake PhD, she actually got a job as a laboratory director at a pharmaceutical company. Isn't it crazy that you have to pass background checks, give your pay stubs and all that kind of stuff to rent an apartment? But this lady got a job at a pharmaceutical company as a lab director with a fake PhD. It never ceases to amaze me how that happens. Hope also faked cancer, and she even shaved her head so she looked like she was undergoing chemotherapy. And it was also during her chemo treatments that she told her family that she was pregnant with twins. A few months down the line, she claimed that she miscarried the twins, and then she had them cremated, and then put each of them in 2 urns where she kind of set up a memorial, I guess, at their house or something like that. And it was later discovered that these urns were empty. So Hope's FDIA actually started with her first child, a daughter. She claimed that her daughter had cerebral palsy. She did not. And even got her ankle braces. I don't know if these were medical grade ankle braces or if she got them from Walmart or something. Either way, she was really committed to this lie. So at some point, Hope actually became pregnant a second time with another girl. And this baby was actually born prematurely. Now, most parents who have a premature baby, I assume, because I haven't been there, I assume that it's, stressful and it's really scary to have to go through. But I guess Hope had a premature baby and she was like, oh yeah, cha-ching, new opportunity for me here. So after she had her second daughter prematurely, Hope's first daughter, the one with cerebral palsy, which is an incurable neurological condition, was cured. Her baby was just cured of cerebral palsy. Wow. And then her new baby, this new premature daughter, just all of a sudden started suffering from just all kinds of medical conditions. And it started with a swallowing disorder. So apparently Hope brought baby girl to the hospital, said that she had a swallowing disorder, and they gave the child a feeding tube. Later, at another point, Hope told the doctors that she believed that her daughter, this baby, had now had cystic fibrosis, which she believed came from the feeding tube. Now, this makes absolutely no sense, and I will tell you why. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic condition. It's caused by a mutation on the long arm of chromosome 7. You don't just catch cystic fibrosis, or you don't just develop it. You're born with it. So one of the tests that's run for testing babies for cystic fibrosis is actually a sweat test, like their sweat, perspiration. They're testing for levels of chloride in the infant's sweat. In children with CF, they have abnormally high chloride levels in their sweat. So knowing that her daughter did not have cystic fibrosis, Hope now had to try and make the test come out positive somehow. So, like any loving mother, she force-fed her daughter dangerous amounts of salt. Salt, aka sodium chloride, and this was in an effort to get her chloride levels super high so that she could try and trick the test and thus the doctors into thinking that her daughter really did have cystic fibrosis. I actually have a friend who has a child with cystic fibrosis, and I've watched her struggle with her daughter's health over the years. So to me, this is particularly revolting. So I couldn't find the outcome of that. I don't know if this worked and her daughter actually did end up testing positive for cystic fibrosis, but at some point Hope's daughter did have an intravenous central line inserted. For those of you who don't know, a central line means it went straight into one of the major arteries of the heart. This is done when someone needs medication delivered straight into their bloodstream. Using a central vein like the vena cava allows for faster and widespread delivery. Anyway, it was also believed that Hope used this central IV line to drain her daughter's body of blood to make her anemic so that she could then rush her to the hospital and be like, oh my God, my daughter is sick and, you know, she's anemic. I think this may have happened more than once because this is eventually what tipped the doctors off and started making them suspicious. Finally, some doctors are thinking. Her daughter would arrive to the hospital severely anemic, they would treat her, and then she'd be perfectly fine. I'm like, okay. Yeah, and the doctors just thought that this was weird. So that's why I think that it had to have happened more than once. So one time to treat her daughter's anemia, they gave her an iron dextran infusion, and this infusion actually almost killed her. Oh, and remember I said that Hope worked for a pharmaceutical company with her fake PhD? Well, this job gave her access to different types of pathogenic bacteria, and after more investigating, it was believed that Hope tried to use some of these bacteria to intentionally infect her daughter with pneumonia. So eventually, Hope was caught for all of this, and she was offered a plea bargain, which she accepted. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2009, and she is currently free. So Munchausen by proxy, FDIA is, yeah, I mean, I already expressed it. This is one that just truly baffles me. Like, it's unbelievable. Something that's also crazy to think about too is we want to think that the only people who are victims are the people who are having the illnesses imposed upon them. But remember that FDIA is classified as a mental illness. So technically, the perpetrators are also victims too. So it's weird to think that this Hope lady and Dee Dee Blanchard were also victims. Because we hear these stories and we're just like, you're a horrible, evil child abuser. You're horrible. You're hurting your own child. But technically, they were victims of this mental condition, which is, oh, it's so bizarre. It's a very strange phenomenon. Yep. So let me know what you guys think of this one. This was another one requested by a couple of you guys. Someone actually, I think, requested the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, but I wanted to talk about like the whole condition as a whole. So yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Researching for this was fascinating and a little disturbing. So as usual, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you want to see more like this, hit the subscribe button. And I think that's it for me today. I will see you guys in the next one. Queen Lemon, over and out. Let's see what you're doing. My camera overheated just as she was walking in. I was about to do my obligatory dog footage, so now I'm on my phone. I don't know what she's looking at. She's looking at the window. Oh my goodness, what a good stretch. You're pretty. You're a pretty baby. She attacks. So aggressive. So aggressive. Aren't you trying to get adopted? Be a good girl. Come here. Show everybody you sit. She knows sit now. Sit. Yes, good girl. Yeah, that's a good baby. Good girl.